Hey guys, Sam here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, and I'm going to be diving into the full range of features the Pocket 6K Pro offers so that anyone considering the camera can see what it can do, including first-time buyers of Blackmagic products, so not just people who are considering upgrading from the Pocket 6K. However, at the end of the video I'll also be making a recommendation on what to do for those considering upgrading from the Pocket 6K to the 6K Pro, so also stay tuned for that. Now, before I get into the main part of the video, I just want to say a quick thank you to all you guys for watching my content and for showing your support. I'm nearing 1,000 subscribers, which is amazing, so let's hit that goal and then smash it. Now, getting into the features of this camera, I first want to talk about the sensor. So I love the 6K Pro sensor. I think it captures skin tones and highlight roll off very nicely, which I think is something that Blackmagic cameras have done really well for a long time, even since their first models. And the fact that they have a Super 35mm sensor now is excellent. Now, comparing the 6K Pro sensor to the original Pocket 6K sensor, they're identical. So the sensor in the 6K Pro is exactly the same as the original one, so you're not getting any better image quality, color, low light, etc. It's exactly the same. The only difference is that out of the box you have the Gen 5 color science on the 6K Pro, which is great, but this is just an out-of-the-box difference because the Gen 5 color science is also available with a firmware update on the original Pocket 6K, so you're not really getting anything different there. Now, in terms of image quality, I think this camera really speaks for itself. The camera delivers an excellent 12-bit RAW image, and it does so in a great codec. I love the B-RAW codec. In my eyes, it's even comparable to the R3D Red codec, which I love. It's one of my favorite codecs. You're getting incredible color science with these sensors. It's going to capture highlight roll-off and really preserve those highlights so you get as much detail as possible, and it really gives you a filmic look, in my opinion. I just really like the way this camera captures light, and especially in the highlights, it's really going to give you a pleasing image to look at, even if your image is a little overexposed. If you look at the way this camera performs in the highlights, it's starting to look more like film and less like digital, and I think that's something that Blackmagic is really good at, and they've done really well for a long time. You're also getting really good low light with this camera, which is something that's overlooked a bit, I think, by a lot of users. It has a dual native ISO at 3200 ISO. Now, despite saying the sensor has a dual ISO, you're still going to get some grain even shooting at 3200, and especially if you go up from there. However, if you do get in a low light situation, this camera actually does really well, especially compared to Red cameras or other cameras in this price range. Even if you bump this camera up near its max ISO, if you run it through DaVinci Resolve's noise reduction software, you're actually going to be able to get a pretty usable image, so that's pretty impressive coming from a cinema camera, and a big step up from some of Blackmagic's previous cameras. If you take a look at the image quality, the Pocket 6K Pro really delivers. Now, the main thing about the Pocket 6K Pro is some of the upgrades that it offers from the original Pocket 6K camera, and really the only upgrades that it has are cosmetic and user experience upgrades. So the main ones that I'll point out are the new battery system, which is more efficient and lasts much longer, the swivel screen with extra brightness, the added internal ND filters that go up to 6 stops, and the EVF. So the first and biggest thing that I want to go over with these cosmetic and user experience upgrades is the built-in ND filters on this camera. The built-in NDs on the 6K Pro are excellent. I've already used them several times on paid shoots, and I love the streamlined flexibility that it offers while shooting. As far as I know, it's the only cinema camera in this price range to have built-in ND filters, and to be honest, the ND filters alone are worth the extra $500 price tag on this camera as compared to the original Pocket 6K. I haven't found any noticeable color shift in these ND filters, and I've also looked at several tests, and they didn't seem to find any noticeable color shift either, which is great news, because having built-in NDs on your system saves a lot of time and hassle if you can just adjust the NDs in your camera rather than using a detachable filter or a matte box for that purpose. They're also very easy to use. You just click a little button on the back of the camera and it flips through the different levels of NDs. So now onto the power options. The new battery included with this system adds quite a bit of efficiency, and it's going to give you about a 60-minute runtime. It uses the Sony NP-F 570 batteries, and that 60 minutes of runtime is good, especially for the size of the battery. However, personally, I would recommend purchasing a V-mount system for the camera. That's just going to give you a lot more runtime, and it's going to give you more flexibility on your power options, as well as some D-tap or USB outputs on the battery, which are going to give you ways to hook up any accessories or added pieces that you have to your camera system. Now the swivel screen is also a huge improvement on this camera as it pops out and tilts both up and down for high and low viewing. The screen is also significantly brighter than the original Pocket 6K, coming in at 1500 nits, so you'll have no trouble viewing it outdoors, and it's an HDR monitor as well, which is a really nice added perk. And last on these cosmetic improvements, we have the EVF. I'm not the biggest user of EVF, so it's nice to have that option on this camera, but it is detachable if you don't have a use for it. As EVFs go, it's a pretty decent one, and it certainly does the job. For some people, this is a great feature. However, for my workflow, it doesn't add a ton of value for me, but certainly it's a welcome upgrade and feature. So as you can see, there's a lot of really good things about this camera. However, it does have some downsides. So where the Pocket 6K Pro really suffers is in its form factor. So if you look at the Red Komodo, for example, it has the Pocket 6K Pro beat by a landslide in this category, as do many other newer cinema cameras. For some reason, Blackmagic has opted to pursue the mirrorless or DSLR camera look and feel, and in my opinion, they would be better off just calling the camera what it is, which is a cinema camera, and just swapping out the DSLR body type for a more efficient and streamlined camera body, because making the body into the lopsided, oddly shaped like blob that it currently is, it does nothing for the camera but hurt it. Personally, I would prefer what Red and Arri are trying to do with their newer cameras, which is to make it essentially a cube. So this keeps the center of gravity in the middle of the camera, and one of my biggest annoyances with this camera is that the lens mounting point is extremely off-center. So if you're using the camera on a gimbal, for example, anytime you change lenses, not only does it throw off the front-back balance of the camera, but it also throws off the left-right balancing of the camera. So you have to make even more adjustments, and if you're using a heavy enough lens, the camera simply won't fit on many gimbals due to this annoying issue, mixed with the already wide and shallow form factor of the camera. So making the camera body into a cube would allow for maximum mounting points for accessories. It allows you to kit out your camera much easier. So this is my biggest dislike about the Pocket 6K Pro, or really any of Blackmagic's pocket cameras. But as I said, I own one of these cameras and it hasn't really caused that many issues for me so far. So it's definitely an annoyance, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. And the only other thing that I want to point out is that if you're coming from a mirrorless system, you don't have any sort of reliable continuous autofocus on this camera, nor do you have internal stabilization. So if you're mounting the camera on a gimbal or a Steadicam, you're going to need a wireless follow focus system, and I'll leave a link in the description for some of my favorite solutions for this camera. But if autofocus and internal stabilization are important for your shooting style, this camera may not be for you. Now, as promised, I want to make a recommendation for current Blackmagic users who are considering upgrading from the Pocket 6K to the 6K Pro. My recommendation is don't. I've used both cameras extensively and it's not worth the upgrade at this point, especially if you already have a cage, mounting accessories, etc., because you'll most likely have to buy a new cage and also some new accessories if you're going to upgrade to this camera, because the camera body is different and it's a different size and shape than the original. What I would personally recommend is waiting it out until the next pocket camera release from Blackmagic. They've been going quite some time with the mirrorless DSLR body type with the pocket cameras, and I have a feeling that they're going to change it up on the next release. They certainly should, because I don't think I know of anyone who actually likes the current body design, so I'm sure that they have a new body design in the works, especially since the current 6K Pro was more of an intermediate release. They didn't upgrade the sensor or really any of the performance on the camera itself. They simply upgraded the included accessories and the user experience. So I would expect in their next release, which granted may not be for a while, they will be tapping into the full potential of the Pocket 6K ecosystem and improving the form factor, upgrading the sensor, potentially improving autofocus, maybe even introducing the option for internal stabilization to appeal to mirrorless shooters, and hopefully giving us even more of what we want at their excellent prices. I'd love to see a global shutter version of the pocket camera at some point, or a full frame sensor, since that is the next logical step up from the Super 35 sensor, or even more dynamic range on this camera would be incredible. So expecting at least one or all of these upgrades on the next release. It'll probably serve current Pocket 6K users to wait until that release to upgrade, since the differences between the Pocket 6K and the 6K Pro are pretty minuscule in comparison to what I'd expect from Blackmagic's next release. So overall, I love this camera. I'd say it's well worth the price, especially if you're just getting started. You're getting amazing image quality, the sensor renders motion in a very cinematic way, and it has excellent color science, and the user experience upgrades that they've added to the 6K Pro make this camera an even greater value than the original Pocket 6K. So I personally own the original Pocket 6K, and I haven't seen any need to upgrade since I bought it, because these cameras retain their value extremely well, and it's going to last you a long time. And I'm certainly looking forward to Blackmagic's future camera releases. So that's about it for this video. If you guys liked the video or found it helpful, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Also, don't forget to check the description for all the links I talked about in this video, as they are affiliate links, and if you click them, I'll get a kickback from it, so that really helps me to grow the channel and make better videos for you guys. So thanks again for watching, and as always, have a good one.